Game begin.
All right. Hello and welcome to Spike Colony number 38. I'm here with my regular co-host, Premodern Showdown Series, Season 4 participant, Michael J. Flores.
I prefer top 8 competitive.
Top 8 competitor. And his regular co-host, the CEO of the Spike Colony podcast, Premodern Showdown Series 5 champion, top one of 8, Lanny Huang.
So we've got like 2 top 8s between us.
Yeah, we've got 2. We share.
If you think about it like that,
the trophy case is stacked in the Spike Colony. We both hold number 3 North American champs trophies. So, what was your stamped card? What was your stamped card?
Mishra's Factory, and it's in one of my decks. It's actually in my green white with blue deck right now.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I have my recurring nightmare, but because I don't play black cards in any of my decks, I have not had the chance to play it, and I can't what's really funny is I don't have Deranged Hermit, so I don't even own a copy of Lanny Rock. I've never played a version of my version of the Rock in paper ever, so as always, as always now, Spy Colony is listener supported radio. Link in description.
That is not a deck I can make 2 copies of. I think I only own 4 copies of Land of War Wastes.
Oh, there you go. I actually have 4 extra Land of War Wastes, but I have no interest in playing the Rock. Michael J, on the other hand, has tremendous interest in playing the Rock.
No one will believe you. Don't lie. No one will believe you. Would never happen. Rocks.
I cannot wait for this. There's just no way that this goes. Right? Okay, think about this. Okay, so Michael J. For the uninitiated, the Premodern Showdown series, episode 6, season 6, is hitting the airwaves. Cloud Goat Ranger on Twitch TV every Wednesday night. Should be at, I believe it's 7 p.m. Eastern. Yeah, 7 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday nights.
This week, the main event, the final match of the evening in the premiere episode of the Premodern Showdown Series 6, really under the lights in Madison Square Garden, literally.
Yeah, we should see if we can book MSG.
Book the Garden, yeah. I was thinking about just going to your house and just playing on the kitchen table, but yeah. Sure, the Garden works.
Yeah, there you go. So Mike is, of course, talking about our match, which is going to be in the first week. But quick rewind for those who don't know.
The main event.
Premodern Showdown Series is a weekly event. It happens on Wednesday nights. There's 8 players. Each of those players have 3 decks. Each week, there are 4 matchups, and the players choose one of their opponent's decks to ban, and then choose a deck from their remaining 2 decks to play a best of 3 match of Magic. So this is the most exciting event of the year, and Michael J has elected to pick the Rock, which if he wins every match with the Rock, it'll just be like a comeback story, because the last time Michael J was in the Premodern Showdown series, he couldn't catch a win against the Rock. If he loses every match,
win against anything.
Yeah,
I mean, let's be honest.
If he loses every single match,
I won 1 match.
If he loses every single match with the Rock, it'll just be a story arc of the Rock certainly does not serve Michael J. Then if you win, that's just roughly half of your matches with the Rock, then the Rock is just doing the Rock. So there's just no outcome.
No, losing all my matches is just even Steven. Let me just give you a little background on this. As has been mentioned many times on this podcast, my mind is chaos. So I've been thinking about this for 2 years, about what decks I would choose. And then I had a really powerful deck choice engine going, and I presented my decks to the Council of Deck Choice, which is me, Lanny, and
2 people whose names both start in Lan.
Yeah. So then, and I had a really good reason for all the decks in my stack, and we put some of them through the paces by playing them in meetups and stuff like that. And Lan H said to me, when you try to get too clever, that's how you end up with Guy's Blessing Stasis. And Lanny H said to me, why don't you just play the decks that you do well with? Because it had struck me that I had chosen decks that I thought were going to be really, really good into, like, I think that they would have been very angleable into the PSS metagame, with the exception of Lanny, because I knew he would play it. I actually would have, I think I almost would have picked your 3 decks, but certainly 2 of the 3 I knew I would be able to pick. But then I was just like, yeah, why don't I just play decks that I can play well? And so I just picked 3 decks that I'd won meetups with this year. So that was my whole criteria. So I almost went with, because I've also won a meetup with Red Green Oath Peluche, Magical Christmas Land Death. So I almost was just Team Wooded Foothills. But I thought it would be funnier to play the Rock.
It would have. It is funnier to play the Rock. I think you would have helped you. It would have worked under your own calculus to just play Burn, Red Green Oath, and Blue White Dreadnought. But instead, you went with the Rock, Goblins, and Burn. I don't actually remember the last time you played Goblins.
I guess I won 2 meetups with it, but they were both in 2023.
Yeah, so
there's
that.
Fine.
Burn I think is a great choice. Burn's a really polarizing deck, and in the PSS metagame, it's actually kind of funny because I went in and I felt pretty confident that I had a sense of what the game theory would be like, but then I sort of just threw it all out the window with the half measure. So for what it's worth, I'm not in love with my lineup. The most important thing that occurred to me after the deck list got revealed and looking at the way the decks shook out was I realized that one of my decks would never get banned by my opponents, and if you put yourself in that situation. So you chose
Gaia's Blessing Stasis.
Yeah. And so I immediately confronted the same problem that Michael J did, which is just like, this deck is always going to be in the mix, and even though I can weaponize my ban pretty well, I'm vulnerable to the same thing from my opponents, basically just being able to isolate. So I'm the same physical mana shorts and arcane denials are both in Gaia's Blessing Stasis and in your Veilstorm deck that is never going to get banned. I'll be carrying the torch for those, giving them a second chance. I mean, for what it's worth, I think that like the Storm deck is eminently playable and it has some really great matchups, but upon the lineup reveal, we found 4 copies of Goblins, which I certainly wasn't expecting. I was expecting three, maybe 4 copies of Burn, but it turned out Goblins was the most popular deck in the PSS 6. After in the PSS 5, there were, I believe, also, I guess it was also the most popular deck last year, because last year, I think James White had, or Jeff White. Jeff White had Jeff Y3.
Oh, Jeff White Weenie.
Yeah, Jeff White Weenie. Jeff Y3 had it. Mike Arnold had it, and no, Mike Arnold didn't have it. Mike Arnold had triple mid range, but Rich had it, and then Jared Doucette had it. But Goblins once again.
My Goblins deck is just Jared Doucette's Goblins deck that you had me build last year to play test against you. And I played it in a meetup and I was like, wow, this deck is great. And so that's just a physical deck. I kept it together. I did change the sideboard though after talking to you.
Yeah. I mean,
Did you notice the fourth pyrokinesis?
I'm very high on 4 pyrokinesis. The Burn deck is, of course,
it's there. I listened to you for fucking once.
The Burn. Well, if you would listen to me anywhere, it would especially be listening to me in the context of Burn not playing.
I'm confident I know how to play Burn. Anyway.
Full 4 Sulfuric Vortex. You're just going to be like left without any of your gears.
I'm literally playing Lanny Rock as one of my decks, and
you're not. You have Yavimaya Elder in your deck, which is also bad.
I do. It's better with Recurring Nightmare, which I cut down to 1 copy.
Exactly. It's better with the card that you're never going to draw.
Literally, the card I went from 2 copies to 1 copy. It's better with that card. So
I mean, at least like I think the Rock is the worst pick out of the 3 of these, because it's the deck that we have not spent any time working on. And there's so many things that are like worth trying. Like we probably should play Skeletal Scrying. Probably should.
I came in second in in the second biggest tournament that I played in the last 12 months.
Yeah, but that was 12.
D-Tab.
That was 12 months ago.
And then I immediately won a meetup with it the day before the deck submissions were due. I feel very confident with that deck that I could go 44%.
Right, but we could. Yeah, I mean, we could play 4 Call the Herd for example. It's like.
Look,
just
man,
the best
how
card.
will I have room for Yavimaya Elder?
Just the best card in the format, and we're playing 3.
We would never. The deck I played at LobsterCon only had 2 Call of the Herd.
I know.
Look, we're already up in the world.
That was a mistake.
But there's not room to play like 4 Ragers and 4 Call of the Herd.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to play. You don't have to play Rager. You can just play Call of the Herd. Especially in this world, right? I mean, Rager is still.
Well, I didn't want to play.
Rager's faster.
I thought there was going to be a lot of red decks, which is how I was choosing my original lineup. So I didn't want to play Rager because it hurts me, and Yavimaya Elder doesn't hurt me. It gets me a little more card advantage. It doesn't hurt at all.
Yeah, but Call the Herd is
every life point matters.
Call the Herd is just is better in every aspect than
I have 3 Call of the Herd, and the one that I played with at LobsterCon only had 2. I'm already up in the world. So here's my thought. I have these 2 red decks, and it's possible that a red deck isn't good in against some lineups. So I'm just always have a coin flip. That's why I chose the Rock. That's literally the reason.
Yeah, I mean,
you
the Rock
never don't have a coin flip.
Yeah. It's a fair place to be, especially because nobody has some of the decks that are really great against the Rock, like Replenish.
Feb.
I mean, Feb, you took a game off D-Tau, so, you know, I would still sideboard engineered play naming Phyrexian, but, you know, you're welcome to do whatever you want to do. But I respect your decisions with regards to how you wanted to play the matchup.
I thought I played it really well. He just killed me.
Well,
you know,
then how well could you have played it, right?
Well, the problem was the clock isn't good. I got him to no creatures,
what makes the clock even worse is not having 4 copies of the Call of the Herd.
Yeah, but you don't have a good long-term answer. Like it's very hard to answer the survival, and you might just be right. I don't know.
I mean, I might be right. I might be wrong.
Like I knew the tech. I just didn't think it was good.
We just don't know, right? So
we never tested it. So how would I know?
Yeah, exactly. Quick aside, like I've been asked in multiple channels how Replenish beats Meddling Mage deck, like a blue-white, either the solution, like the Dreadnought thing is one thing, but like some people are like, oh, how do you beat the solution with Meddling Mage, Armageddon, and counterspells? And I was just like, I don't know. It's like when I find out, I'll let you know, but I don't think it's possible. I
beat Groatog at LobsterCon last 2 years ago.
Yeah,
first round.
I mean,
he had Meddling Mage, and I beat him.
Yeah, I mean, I had a video that's going to be releasing by the time this podcast out, where I beat Fran and Paul Master on Groatog versus Replenish, and I had triple Meddling Mage, and I won. So
I mean, I just chained my enchantments or whatever my forecasters wanted at a time, and you couldn't stop them all. That's actually what happened for me.
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, your forecasters, like there's a few things that the aggro control player needs to know about the matchup. One is that the parallax enchantments don't do anything without a payoff. And so in many contexts, you're very welcome to just like let a parallax wave resolve. And, your permanents are going to come back, and just worry about
what they can wave out the Meddling Mage and then resolve their payoff.
Right. But their payoff, if the parallax wave is on the battlefield, then their payoff is not in, it tends not to be in the graveyard, right? So your Meddling Mage order typically looks like listen. Yeah. Your Meddling Mage order typically goes Swords to Plowshares, then Parallax Wave, then Replenish. The reason why it's Swords to Plowshares is because Swords to Plowshares is the only 1 mana spell. It's a spell that lets them cast more than 2 spells a turn. Replenish, without Swords to Plowshares, doesn't cast more than two spells a turn. And then also remember the Psychotog list is different, right? So around LobsterCon of 2 years ago, the Psychotog list would have 2 counterspells. Like I have 4 counterspells in my main deck. And then they were playing Winter Orb instead of Armageddon. Armageddon's a lot better against Replenish than Winter Orb is. Winter Orb is still good because it prevents the replenished player from ever getting to 8 mana to do a double 4-cast spell turn. But in any case, name Swords of Plowshares, then you name Parallax Wave because Replenish takes more spells to catch up. Like, Replenish is a 4 mana spell, right? But you need to cast multiple blue 3 mana spells before you cast Replenish to make it something. And then once you've done that, you've like over leveraged yourself on the Replenish. So if just Replenish gets countered, you're in trouble. And then the final name is Replenish, and then at that point you just need to stop Opalescence from hitting the battlefield, which is trivial, or you can just like have a 5/5.
Good luck with that.
But in any case, somebody was just like asking me like how you beat the deck, and I'm just like, or how you should sideboard. And I'm like, well, you have a deck that has a fundamental problem. All of its spells cost too much mana, and you're like asking like, how do you defeat a deck that really punishes you for being a super mana hungry deck, right? We're like talking about like every tool in the book to punish a mana inefficient deck, and we're talking about the least mana efficient deck in the format. It has 16 4-drops. It's just kind of like, well, I don't know. I would board in 15 removal spells, I guess.
I don't know. Win the roll and draw your acceleration. You might just squash them. That's what you did to poor Jared Doucette in the top,
that was Rich Shea, but yeah.
Oh, it was Rich Shea in the top 4 of
yeah,
top 2?
Well, the Replenish deck typically doesn't have acceleration unless you're playing it with me, right? So the stock Replenish is 4 Ancient Tomb, 2 City of Traders, and then even then you have to wedge like you tend to have to wedge a Intuition or Attunement in there, so you're still very invested in getting this Replenish off. So you can get good ideas. You can just be like, okay, I'm gonna get to 5 and then I'm gonna Orange Chant Replenish, and it's just like, okay, well, everything needs to go right for you, right? You need to have Intuition, you need to have Frantic Searcher, you need to have Attunement and everything in hand in order to even set that turn up.
It's a who's the beatdown question, right? There are games where the Meddling Mage player is the beatdown, right? Where they hold the initiative, and the onus is on the Replenished player to stop them from killing them, right? And then there are games where the Replenished deck is the beatdown, and the Meddling Mage deck is playing from behind.
I think it's a neither situation. The replenished player is unlikely to be ahead unless their opening is like they're on the play, they have turn 2 Attunement, and everything's like ready to go. But it's like
I think that it is functionally that way in every game, and that some of the games the replenished deck is the beatdown.
I'm saying this is like the no gear situation for a replenish. Because you can't play beatdown because like it's basically impossible for you to like lace like. I mean, I don't know. Calling it one thing or another doesn't matter. Like, what matters is that like you're very unlikely to be able to get your plan off, because every kind of resistance from the aggro control player is like Meddling Mage, counter spells, and land destruction. So like no matter where you turn, like if you want to sit back and overwhelm counter spells, then you'll just get land destruction. If you want to lace together multiple spells like an Attunement into Orm's Chant Replenish, they can disrupt that by just having Meddling Mage, which then adds one more card to your combo. So then you're just like, okay, well now I need a Looter, an Orm's Chant, a Swords to Plowshares, and Replenish, and then nothing needs to get countered during that sequence, or I just like don't get LD during that sequence.
Lanny, I don't know that we're going to solve this right now, but we should talk about PSS decks. No, I don't even know how we got on this stand.
No, I was saying one of the important things is like some matchups are unsolved, right? So we're talking about the Rock versus Full English Breakfast.
Oh, I see.
So it's just like, okay, well, what's the best move, right? And you're like, well, I liked what I did, but I lost. And I'm like, okay, well, let's try something different, right? Like,
I don't know.
Might as well.
I hear you. You might be right. I think
I don't know that I'm right. We might try my thing, which is to have Engineered Plague in your deck, and then that might not work. And then it'll be just a situation exactly like I described, which is just like, okay, well, maybe the Rock versus Hermit Feb is very much like Replenish versus a Blue-White. Like the Replenish versus the Rock is the same thing, except for Replenish has all the control, right? The Rock just can't do anything. You would need to change your rock. That was like my final point, which is just that you would need to change your rock deck list to give it access to a plan that's coherent in the situation. Because one of the big things.
How did I beat D-Tau in the game that I beat him? Haunting Echoes?
No, you like attack for 6.
I beat him down with elephants.
You just said, you attack for 6. It wasn't even elephants. It was like 2 treetop villages. Like you just got him
Yeah.
low on resources. Like I don't know. I think you had like a naturalize and then, or like maybe you got one pernicious deed activation and then you attack for 6 for a couple turns. And like Hermit Feb, the mana base does a lot of damage.
Beat him with Haunting Echoes. Maybe that's wrong. I think it's the best way to go because it seemed to me like their ability to recover was really, really good.
I think that Haunting Echoes is not a good plan when you only have 2 copies and very little ways to search them out, right?
What about ripping it?
Yeah. I mean, that's the same thing as if my Grotog plan was to board in 2 chill against burn, right? And then just be like, well, I'll draw it eventually. And that's a deck with 12 cantrips.
In the immortal words of Ja Morant, or I could take a step back 3.
Yeah, sure. In any case, there's one regular full English breakfast deck and there's one Hermit Feb deck in the hands of McLean Denny and Mike Harris. So it's not the biggest problem. The other question, we have goblins at roughly 50%, but you beat Jared, so you feel like you'll never lose. We have burn. Burn's just bad, but if your opponent has burn left after bans, I assume that you're just not going to play the rock.
I mean, who's got burn? Chris DiBiase.
Chris and Harris. Harris pulled the I knew Harris was going to be locked on Breakfast and Blue White Dreadnought because those are the decks that he's been playing.
He knows how to play well.
But his third deck being Burn was unexpected. I don't think I've seen him play Burn or really heard too much talk. But he's running Dick's Burn with Dick's Burn with 20 lands instead of Dick's Burn with 19 lands and a Lava Dart. But otherwise, the rest is Dick's Burn. But
maybe he's just on Burn as his rock deck, right? Like if all else fails.
No, I mean Burn catches bans though. It's like so there's only a few I have like a double rock lineup and then you have the literal rock. Chris DiBiase has black white control, which is I don't think black white control is going to catch too many bans in too many lineups. The one deck that it's oppressively good against is Red Green Oath, which is only being played by one player, which is James Smits. James Smits returning champion, by the way. Landstill is not in the PSS because it's a shitty deck.
No, I'm just saying it is another deck that Black White controls.
Right. Well, once we're in the universe of the decks having been decided. I forgot that Michael Phillips has the rock. So Michael Phillips has the little rock. He has Blasto Rock. So this is looking more like a classic rock deck list with Blastoderms and Wall of Roots powering out Blastoderms.
Classic rock is the way that I like to talk about the pre-Lanny rock sort of Wall of Roots into 5/5 for 4, but you don't have to do anything because it just kills itself rock.
Yeah, that's been the nomenclature. Well, you have to block it with your Mog Fanatic sometimes, which is tough luck. Sorry for all the fans.
I don't know if anyone's ever taken damage from a Blastoderm that didn't have haste. I don't know if they have. It's just not a data point I'm aware of. That's all I'm saying.
I certainly haven't seen it in a while, but if it comes out on turn 3, maybe there's a chance your opponent has.
To be fair, didn't it win the Czech Nationals last year?
I don't know. It doesn't leave the people. The people who have Blastoderm in their rock decks don't stop playing Blastoderm in their rock decks. So it's around and it's going to win sometimes. And more power to you if you get it through. And, why don't we just cut all of everything and we just play Call the Herd and Blastoderm, right? It's
I want to play a deck that's just Call the Herd, Blastoderm, Rofalos, maybe Stampeding Wildebeest, Wall of Blossoms, Wall of Roots, just the rock, but just green.
Yeah.
I want to just be mid-range green. And then Lan H was just that. Why don't you just play the mono green or green white or green red, both pollution?
Yeah. Why don't you play? Yeah. Why don't you play a deck that just is better? Because just playing guys is not a strategy in Premodern, right?
It's imagine if
you just played a guy.
The same thing. But you just crushed every creature deck.
It is kind of strange though, because the reason Call the Herd is good is because sometimes decks can't deal with just a guy, but the majority of the time decks can't, or like they can't beat just a guy after sideboarding, right? They can't, like they can't. The reason they can't beat just a guy is because they're worried about the other thing that you're doing, which is like whatever, blowing up their lands or like triggering Oath of Druids or whatever nonsense, that they're just like really, really concerned with this, like this other thing you're doing, and then just a guy gets through. But if your deck is all guys, then they're just like, well, I can beat guys. Like that's
just in the
in
the Spice tournament. I'm just thinking about, I think I only intuition for Call of the Herd one time. It was against Brian Lonergan in the top 8. I didn't even cast my Call of the Herd the turn after intuitioning for it, and I lost that game.
Yeah.
So I'm like,
nice
I don't think I ever paired. I was just like, I drew the intuition. I'm like, nothing that I have to intuition for here is going to win the game. You know, I think of intuition as like a vampiric tutor where I cast it and then I set up my next play and my next play beats them. But yeah,
you're just like looking through your deck and you're like, this book doesn't contain any answers.
Right. So I'm like, oh, I can grind. He wasn't like so far ahead, right? But like, there was just no point in me casting an upheaval there, right? Like, you don't want to use your upheaval in this spot. You need to save it for when you're gonna, close out the game.
That's true.
So if I had drawn intuition in game 3, I would have gotten worship in 1. But
talk to us more about your PSS lineup. So rock, goblins, burn. So aside from the fact that you just think that you're good at playing,
I'd shown you my original lineup, even though I knew you were going to be my enemy. And you're just like, oh, I was really sure that you were going to play burn. I was just like, had this nagging feeling. I'm like, I have to play burn.
That was the only comment that I had, though. I thought you could just keep the exact same lineup that you're talking about and then just play burn instead of like whatever the third thing was.
Well, but no, you had made the comment, why don't you just play decks that... I think that you had made a comment and I extrapolated that to...
Yeah, you might have expanded it farther.
That I know that I can play.
Because in my mind, I'm thinking... Like, you showed me 3 decks, and like I think that Red-Green Oath might be like the other deck. Like, so Blue-White Dreadnought was a slam dunk, because not only is it one of the most powerful decks, it's also just a deck that like you feel comfortable piloting. Like, you feel so comfortable piloting it, you would like take a card out that looks at 4 cards to get you closer to your combo, and you're like, I'm just gonna put a card in that just looks at 1 card. That just puts the top card right into my hand and does nothing else 95% of the time. And you still
I blocked all the bad matchups and only lost to you.
Yeah. So anyways,
literally beat the black removal decks twice.
So like you're so confident in your deck that you would do that, and then you're just like I was like, okay, so obviously that's going into PSS. In fact,
I would not have played Slabos Web if I had played Blue-White Dreadnought.
I had like a prediction spreadsheet that like had it like in green, high confidence next to your name. Like, I thought you were a lock.
That was in my original lineup.
I thought you were a lock to play Blue-White Dreadnought and to play Burn, and then whatever third deck was just going to be like some kind of whatever.
If I had played those 2, I probably would have put Landy Hoth as my third deck. Because then that lineup would have just been like take all comers, no angles.
Right.
Right.
And then but yeah, and then we had a conversation. You told me there's 3 decks. I forgot what they were at the time, and then Burn wasn't in there, and I was just like, well, that's crazy. Like, why wouldn't you play Burn?
I got to Fluctuator, Blue-White Dreadnought, and White Weenie Blue.
Oh yeah, the White Weenie Blue I thought was just a very, very like weird
Lan
choice.
was just like, you cannot play this deck.
Yeah.
The mana's too bad, right? And I was just like, maybe Lan's just salty because he was playing White Weenie Blue at the meetup, and then I beat him with the Rock. And then I'm like, oh man, maybe he's right. And then like the only reason I had Fluctuator in my lineup was because you had shown me the Fluctuator with the 6 sideboard tech. And then I was just like, you know what? I don't need to do this to myself. I'll play this on day 2 at LobsterCon. I will scratch every Fluctuator itch I need to scratch on day 2 of LobsterCon, right? This will be fine. I don't need to do this to myself now. And I'm not going to tell the secret sideboard card because it is too sweet. It's probably going to come out between now and LobsterCon because I can't keep my mouth shut. But
it's not even your tech too. I was like just playing a casual. No, I was like just playing a casual on Magic Online, and I was like playing Landy Hoth, and I was like just trying to feel out the deck and see what I liked and disliked. And then just somebody like in a post board game just like completely rocks me with this card that I just like had never considered putting in a Fluctuator deck, and it's just going to remain a secret, and you just have to guess. And
it's so good.
LobsterCon side event.
Yeah, like you'll see it at the LogicCon side event, top 1. Right.
Yeah.
So I was super excited to play that, and I'm like, ugh. Then I was just like, I think I've won 1 match lifetime with Fluctuator. right? Like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
I was so bad at it in testing, even though I had Flint's deck last year. I chose to get out of my deal with him, and then I guess play a worse deck because Flint top.
Well, it wasn't something that we could accurately test, right? Because one of the things was like in testing, you're like, okay, well, I know that you're playing this deck, and I'm like, I just know how to beat it, right? You're like, oh, I think I got you, and I'm like, okay, my sideboard has 4 milling mages in it. I'm just like, I have a pretty simple plan. In game 1, you can't beat Enlightened Tutor for Tormod's Crypt. So I'm going to mulligan until I Enlightened Tutor for Tormod's Crypt. And then in game 2, I'm going to mulligan until I have Meddling Mage in my hand. I'm like, my deck has Mox Diamond. I'm just going to have Meddling Mage on turn 1. Like, you can't even miscalculation it.
Well, yeah, so, like I said, I've won, like, 1 lifetime match with Fluctuator.
Yeah. No.
So,
so that was...
it was just, my lineup was just going to be, like, I could totally see where Lan was coming from. He's just like, this is just 3x blue-green.
Yeah, it was too insane, but then you threw the baby out with the bathwater. You were just like, oh, well, I guess I'm not going to play my blue-white Dreadnought. Like, the only good decision that you made, which was to strap blue-white Dreadnought and lock and load and just ready for it to get banned every week so that you could just play Fluctuator or blue-white Weenie. But then you just, like, went with this other thing, which, once again, I think that it was a critical error in my analysis that, like, you want all 3 of your decks to be bannable. Like, you can't just, like, show up and just be like, oh, well, like, you know, this deck is just going to be an option every week because, like, nobody ever wants to ban this.
Well, let's go through other people's lists. But, I mean, I'll just give you an example. I think Nick Mayo could very plausibly ban my Goblins deck. He has elves in his lineup.
I said Rock is the one that's not getting banned. Goblins is very bannable.
I think my burn deck is going to get banned more than half the time.
I think
nobody wants.
Is that every single one of? I'm not saying that the Goblins of Burn will never get banned. I'm saying that the Rock will never get banned.
At least
and that's
2 of my decks.
That's not that hard. The hard part is picking 3 decks.
I'm just saying, Nick Mayo's got elves. I think he's going to ban my Goblins deck. Don't know, though.
I think that your Goblins deck and your Burn deck will see bans at least multiple times throughout the series, and that I don't think anybody...
Each will see multiple bans.
I don't think anybody's going to ban the Rock for the same reason that I don't think anybody's going to ban my Storm deck.
But that's actually, Lanny, why I wanted to have the Rock, because... In the case that I had a disaster lineup, like in PSS, which is the one I played in PSS4?
Yeah.
In PSS4, like there were 2 lineups that were just disasters for me. Like I could never plausibly beat Rich, and I could never plausibly beat Aaron.
That's because you had an unplayable lineup. Like the whole point is that your lineup is 3 bangers, and then like your opponent will always have to choose. Like, just imagine for a moment that you've got your arsenal, right? Right? And then
I have 11 decks built.
So we talked about if I could. So we talked about in a very classic episode of Spy Colony, we talked about AK-47 versus crossbow.
And then you became an archer the next day.
Yeah, and so
I shot archery yesterday.
So it was great. So we were like, okay, AK-47, great in some situations, but it's not as good in other situations, and especially the situations that matter to me right now than a bow. And so really, if you were just like, okay, let's think of the perfect weapon arsenal, it's like I've got AK-47, then I got bow, and then for the third one, you're just like, what if I'm hungry on the battlefield? And I'm going to bring can opener. And then so you're like, boom, can opener.
Spoon.
Yeah, spoon. Let's put spoon in the lineup. So our lineup is crossbow, or not crossbow, whatever, compound bow, AK-47, and spoon. And opponent is like, I ban the bow. Like, I'll take the AK-47 any day because, I'm going to be in close quarters. I've got the strategy.
Or I've just combat armor. Against bullets.
I've got
arrows.
And then other opponent is like, I will ban AK-47 because I'm going to nullify the compound bow. But no opponent is like, oh, shit. He might open up a can of beans on me. Yeah,
multi-tool can be, spoonish.
Yeah.
But it could also dig a ditch.
Yeah.
right? It could also behead a man. Multi-tool is really good.
Multi-tool.
I mean, you have to be like a Green Beret, or because otherwise, I don't think a regular person could behead a man with multi-tool, but a Green Beret could.
Yeah. Well, and Green Beret would just be my third weapon, right? I would just be like AK, bow, Green Beret, and then you would actually have to decide, right?
With multi-tool.
Yeah. But it just makes it too easy for your opponents to decide their ban when they're just like, well, they've got 2 decks and 1 marginal deck. It's like, well, I'm going to give them good, because like the other thing is like good decks in pre-modern, like they're not even bad against their bad matchups, right? They just like sometimes win their bad matchups like in like hilarious fashion. It'll just be like Blue White Dreadnought. It's like, oh man, I don't know what I'm going to do about this black white control deck. It's like, well, the black white control deck still only has like the average deck has like 8 cards that are against like blue white Dreadnought, and a deck that's good against Blue White Dreadnought has like 16 cards. It's like, it's not hard to sometimes put 15 of those 16 cards, like for 15 of those 16
mage
should be at the bottom, Yeah, exactly.
What I did.
Yeah.
Got in for 4.
So I think I think that both of us made this mistake. I'm not kicking myself too much because I think the Storm deck is really sweet, and I do think that if I just end up like, if the Storm deck just never gets banned and I just like play it every week, I'll still like be happy because I really believe in the deck, and I think that other people like are going to be more willing to battle with Storm. Well, it's actually kind of funny because I think all 3 of my decks, people are just like, oh, these decks suck. They're not real decks. Like, it's
but that's the same as last year. Everyone thought your decks were joke decks last year, and you won the PSS.
Well, I don't know. Like, the thing is, I've strayed so much further from playability. So like, the thing that was a joke about my Replenish deck was that I had Mox Diamond, and the thing that was a joke about my Parfait deck is that I had Burning Wish. But the 56 other cards were really, really good, right? So they were like, you
still had a plausible mana base without Mox Diamond in your Replenished deck.
Yeah, exactly. So
you still have 27 land.
So people are like, so even if you like didn't fear, like, even if you didn't fear my Grotog deck, right? As Rich today astutely pointed out, I can just win with all the cards that Grotog shares with Blue Eye Dreadnought. Like, I don't have to draw any of the Grotog cards. I can just draw the Blue Eye Dreadnought cards, and then you still have reason to fear.
I'm a little
my Storm deck.
That people don't realize that Grotog's a real deck.
I mean, I think they don't realize it just because of lack of lack of representation. But like the reason why I don't try to go too hard on Grotog being like a great deck or the best deck. I mean, I've said it before that I think that it could be, it could be a contender, and I think that putting it in tier 2 is already rating it higher than most people would rate it. But I think a testament to that is just that, like, I'm still changing the deck list. Like, the deck list that I set registered for PSS isn't even what I think to be the final form of the deck. And that's the same reasoning that I use for putting a lot of other decks in tier 2, because people will just be like, oh, well, why isn't
this is very similar to your $1,000 tournament deck that you came in second.
Well, all my Grotog decks are similar. There's like,
no, I mean, like,
the first 52 cards you can't change, right? Like,
but the important details are Days, Swords, Plowshares, Balance, and the sideboard. Right. So the main difference here: no chills.
Yeah, I'm gonna rock the Call of the Herd, and instead of making it so my opponent can't play spells for the rest of the game, I'm just gonna put a guy on the battlefield. It's gonna be like,
wow, yeah.
It's like you have Grim Lavamancer. I have 3/3 token, and guess what?
I know what I'm not banning.
Another one's coming.
I just know what I'm not banning. No chills, huh? I have 2 red decks.
Anyways, the key change to my Grotog deck is that I trimmed 2 copies of Fire Ice, and I added a land to the deck in the form of Cephalid Colosseum. It came to me in a dream. I was just like, well, what if I gushed? And then after I gushed, I looted 3. I was just like, that seems insane.
I actually had a dream about a presentation that I'm going to do. Like, I was just like, oh, I saw this email, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to do this presentation tonight after playtesting with Roman. So I started writing it, and then I was just like, actually, everybody's on vacation for Memorial Day. I don't need to rush on this. right? Like, and then I had a dream about it. So I'm going to have a sick presentation that I'm going to do sometime.
There you go. It's always good to work in your sleep for all the hustlers out there. But yeah, in any case, I'm still working on the Grotog deck. I still think that like it's not in its final form, and then until it gets there, like, you know, because like Blue White Dreadnought is like optimized within an inch of its life, right? Like every single card in it has
I think there's a lot of variation.
I mean,
3 counter spells versus 4, 3 dazes versus
bad,
4.
bad. 4 counterspell, 3 or less days, and then like I think Fran just gets bored, and
no,
he's
I'm just saying
like,
these are the things that I worked from the Kaplan list, right? The Kaplan list has in the neighborhood of 3 to 4 of both of those cards. No brain freeze. Those are the things that I would say are standouts.
Right, but that's like I said, that's optimized within it, right? People aren't like asking questions like, oh, should this deck contain intuition, or should it contain I don't know, whatever.
Enlightened Tutor?
Disenchant main or Enlightened Tutor, yeah. Like people
well, also number of Swords to Plowshares, number of Last Breaths in the sideboard. I think
this is all not enough to materially change the fact, like that's my point about Blue Eye Dreadnought. It's just like you can do whatever you want with, you know, the 4th counterspell, the 4th days, even the 3rd days. You can put a null in the main deck if you so desire, and you're still just going to win all your matches. I don't think it's optimal, but it doesn't matter, right? Because the first 50 cards are optimal, and you're going.
The engine of the deck is so good.
The first 50 cards are tier 1, right? The first 50 cards in the Grotog deck aren't tier 1. Like you still need to you still need the last 10 cards to like really, really perform above replacement for you to like win a tournament. Like I think that if I had like had just a few cards different every single time, like recently I went 4-0 on a playoff, and I'm just kind of like, well, I don't know. I mostly won the playoff with Meddling Mage, but like you know, that was a playoff where I had to use like the chill plan, or the 4th counterspell like really mattered. I'm like, if I had a 3 counterspell list, maybe, you know, my expectation would be a lot lower. So as much as I am I feel personally capable of like performing at a tier 1 expectation with Grotog. One, I'm not playing, you know, Red Green Oath or Goblins. I went 6-0 with my Mono Red Goblins deck. Like that's how good Goblins is, right? Like I cut as many of the good cards as I could from Goblins, and just the good cards still got there. People were just like, oh man, it looks pretty bad when you draw 2 Ancient Tomb. I'm like, well, guess what? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if I start the game with 10 life, like for no reason. Like even if I tapped Ancient Tomb once for 2 mana, and then every single other time it was 1 mana, 2 damage, float 1, and not use it.
Do you think your Landy Hoth deck is going to get banned 7 times?
I think that. Okay, so let's talk about Landy Hoth. It's also a deck with like a lot of scary cards, but like not.
Yeah, I think this is approaching a 7 ban.
I mean, let's see. Yeah, let's see. This one, I think this Mayo's Terrageddon deck and Elves deck is not particularly scared of Landy Hoth. Although it's hard to say.
But are they scared of Growatog? I guess Engineered Plague versus Elves, but like Terrageddon don't care about nothing.
Well, it's the Rock.
I almost lost to Terrageddon at the meetup this week. SWB so savagely outplayed me. It was awesome, but I won the match.
There you go.
It was freaking awesome. I'll tell the story real quick, right? So I'm on the play. I get like a Mox Diamond draw. So I'm like Mox Diamond, a bunch of Winter's Grasp. I think I have first turn Sylvan Library. Then I'm like Winter's Grasp. You know, I have 2 Rishon Ports going. It's the mid game. He has Sylvan Library before I start locking down all of his mana. And he's just discarding Terravores every turn, and I just eventually kill him with the Mistress Factory and Treetop Village, right? So he's just sitting there with a shit-eating grin discarding Terravores, right? And I'm like, God, Pog's sitting there watching the match, and I'm like, something's going on. This is just like, this isn't right. This is, you know, I sideboard, and then he's like, he goes first, and he's just like, first turn, Mox Weathered Wayfarer. And I'm sideboarded in a way that I cannot beat his first turn.
Yeah.
Right? So then he goes second Weathered Wayfarer, and he just starts attacking me. And I'm like, I just like discard twice, and then I'm like, I can't win, right? So he's just like, I was so close to winning game 1 because you had Sylvan Library down to like 7, right? He's like, if you paid 1 more, I was just gonna like Nihilland bolt you.
Nice.
Which would have been in a sick, because he's just sitting there discarding Terravores. But at some point I had double Sphere of Resistance, so he wouldn't have been able to make that play anyway. And then I just won game 3 on account of going first and getting an Oath Belief draw. But I have not felt that outplayed in a long time, because I knew he was outplaying me in game 1.
You just don't know how.
It's one of those things where like, yeah, like, you know, it's like a Rounders thing where I'm like, I win the hand, and I win the hand by a mile, and I don't feel good, right? Like, I know he's outplaying me, I just didn't know how.
No, that's just me against that's me against Rich Shea every time I play him. Like I had the Mox draw against his Goblins deck, and I'm like, I'm sure this is all part of Rich's plan. I'm just like, he's just getting the Goblins deck out of the way. And then even after I won the PSS, and I'm like, I'm sure this is part of Rich's plan. I was just like, he just wants me to feel like I'm ahead, so that the next time
I'm getting the W, and I know I was not the best player at the table. Like, that's I hated it, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I'm like accusing him. I'm like, I know you're up to something, right? And I'm like, what are you doing? You know, is it like false sense of security? He has to have lands. He had Sylvan Library on turn 2, you know? He's like, oh, I don't have any lands. I'm just going to discard Terravores for the next 4 turns. You know, like, anyway, it was a great match.
We got to see some awesome Terrageddon action with South American champion Demian Verneri take down the Magic Online Challenge this past weekend with basically the same idea, a Bant Terrageddon deck. This one is prominently featuring 4 Meddling Mage in the main deck, 4 Call the Herd, along with the rest of the sort of usual suspects in the Terrageddon deck. But the Weathered Wayfarer into Continual Wasteland Lock is hilariously good against Replenish, a deck that I generally and Devour combo, both decks that I would like put ahead of Terrageddon. And both decks that I have added Mox Diamond to, which would help defray the Weathered Wayfarer Wasteland problem.
Not enough, man. Like, Pog asked me why I conceded so fast. I'm like, because he has 2 more Wastelands in his deck.
Yeah.
And like, he's just gonna, and even once I get out of this zone of him wastelanding every play that I make, he's still just gonna draw 2 extra cards a turn. I can't stop him, right? I need to play land, right? And so, otherwise, he's just going to attack me, which is just humiliating.
Yeah, Weathered Wayfarer is hilarious. I generally think that the card isn't very good, but I have like,
it's not good, but it's surprisingly great.
It's great when it is great, right? It's great if your opponent's deck is like all non-basics, and like, you know, for what it's worth, like you could have put yourself in a situation where you like maybe could have had like Mox Diamond and Oath of Druids, but I totally understand like the problem where you're just like, your opponent's like turn 1 Weathered Wayfarer, and you're like, wait, you're like, I actually don't have anything for this. I mean, if I was going to have a rock deck in my lineup, which I have many of, I think Terrageddon's a great choice. It's definitely a deck that it looks very up and coming. It looks a lot better now than in previous iterations. Like, just the green-white version maybe felt a little bit so-so, but this blue-white version
shockingly bad against red decks.
Well, that's going to happen, but that's also why you
really bad.
That's what your 2 sideboard Zern orbs are for, baby. Just gotta find them. But anyways, the thing that flipped me on it was just like watching the deck beat combo, right? So like the green-white deck was just always looked so bad against combo because it just like wasn't enough. Like, it was like, oh, maybe we'll sideboard Sphere of Resistance, but it wasn't enough, right? Because like the red-green Oath deck barely beats combo decks sometimes, and it needs to have Sphere of Resistance, all 8 of the Disruption lands, and 8 Stone Rains. So this Terrageddon deck doesn't have that same kind of interaction, but instead it can kind of dance around and just do Meddling Mage and Weathered Wayfarer Lock as
get in for 5.
Yeah, and it also draws towards Armageddon. You know, Nick electing for the full 4 copies. I don't recall how many Damien had, but that's a sweet deck. But yeah, so now that we're 50 minutes into the cast, we should go ahead and run down lineups. I have
all right. Let's start with Lanny Huang. Veilstorm, Landy Hoth, Gat. If you did not put Lanny on Gat, you have not been paying attention to the previous 37 episodes of the Spike Colony and any content that has come forth before the Spike Colony.
I think episode 1 and 2,
universe.
I might not have talked about Gat because it was lost.
I mean, Lanny won his first ever pre-modern anything with Gat. Never looked back. He loves Gat. So I asked Flint Espo if I could play Gat and 12-12. He said no. They're both Gush Engine decks. Landy Hoth, I felt like Landy was going to be high on this. When I was testing Landy Hoth for the brewery $1,000 tournament, I was really excited. I called Lanny and I'm like, this deck's really great. It has mulch. And Lanny's just like, you don't have enough data. You can't play that.
Mulch
like,
is
okay.
I still hate mulch. Mulch is just like pre-flop raising with a low suited connector.
So good. It's so good in this deck. Like every time Land casts it, whether it's good or not, he's always like, see? He just says, see? Right? Sometimes he'll say draw 3, and like his draw 3 just includes like
put everything in the graveyard. Just putting 3 enchantments
in the graveyard.
Well,
yeah, just it was draw 3.
It was hysterical because we were playing a test game, and then I like mulch, and I hit 1 land and 1 of each Parallax Enchantment and Opalescence, and that was just like so unlikely to happen, but it happened because Land was watching, right? Every other time I'm just like mulch for 0, mulch for 1, and nothing. But like that time it was really like mulch for 1 of everything.
What happened was I put 1 of each Parallax Enchantment in my graveyard, and I drew my 4th land, and I had to replenish. Like, it was weird. Like, it's like the deck was designed to do this or something. So, yeah, great deck. I think, like, if you were going to build a Take on All Comers lineup, this would be probably my number 1 pick. I chose not to do a Take on All Comers lineup. And then Veilstorm is the dark horse. I put Mono Blue Storm in your range. I did not have the Lotus Veil in my bingo card, though.
Yep.
So talk to me about the Lotus Veil.
Land texted me, and he was like, this deck wants Lotus Veil. And I'm like, can't play Lotus Veil, it gets wastelanded. And then he was just like, just twiddle their wasteland. And if you twiddle their wasteland, you can also twiddle your Lotus Veil. And I was just like, you can twiddle their wasteland. And I'm just like, you know what's even better than twiddling their wasteland? It's just mana shorting them. So then I got to work, and basically just cut Lotus Petal for Lotus Veil, up the mana sources, because now like we want to be playing a lot of lands, and Lotus Veil just gives you a undisenchantable, unvision charmable, unduressable mana accelerator. So I really
that happens to be insanity with Cloud of Fairies.
Yeah, that happens to go completely nuts with all of the untappers. And so I started testing the deck, and I was just like, wow, this like Lotus Veil idea really works. Like, one, not a lot of decks play Wasteland. Like Red, Green, Oath, and sometimes Goblins play Wasteland, and those are the best decks in the format, don't get me wrong. But you know, even then, you know, you don't have to be over leveraged on Lotus Veil, right? It's a card that you can just move in and out of your deck and it not be a big deal. Or if you want, you can just brute force it by executing the mana short plan, as I talked about. So
you're just so arrogant you don't even have a Hydroblast in your sideboard? You just don't. I don't need to respect the basic mountain.
Yeah. So Hydroblast is just a card that like the majority of the time counters a Shatter, and basically the versions of the deck before had like 4 Hydroblast, 4 Arcane Denial. So it was just like against every other deck, I'm going to bring in 4 Arcane Denial, right? But against red decks, I'm going to bring in 4 Hydroblast. And I'm just like, well, why don't you just bring in the Arcane Denials for the red deck? And then while we're at it, why does it have to be Arcane Denial? Like, why can't it be a little bit of every good counterspell? And in fact, the only counterspell I forgot to put in the sideboard, like I have actual counterspell. I have Prohibit. I have Arcane Denial. I have Misdirection. I have Divert.
Why is Prohibit good? Oh, just because of your medallions?
Yeah, it's just one. Well, okay, so think about it, right? I'm just like, what do I counter with Hydroblast? And I'm like, okay, well, normally the pattern goes like I play a rock, and then I go for my first untapper, and then my opponent goes Disenchant, and then I go Arcane Denial. But I'm like, well, I can just Prohibit in all the same places. And I'm like, I was like boarding in Arcane Denial, and then my opponent would just be like, play a spell that matters on turn 4. And I'm like, I'm not ready to combo off, but Arcane Denialing here is going to give them 2 cards. And like any opponent, like, so
And in a sideboard game, those two cards might be like a Pyroblast and a Natural
I would be playing against opponents. Like, I would be testing, and I'd just be like, they'd be like turn 2 Meddling Mage. I'd like look at my Arcane Denial, and I'd just be like, okay, like, this is not good. So I added Prohibit. I added every flavor of... I basically added every flavor of Counterspell and every flavor of Bounce Spell. And I forgot that I was going to add Memory Lapse. So I have 2 Arcane Denial, but I really wish I had 1 Arcane Denial, 1 Memory Lapse. But regardless... I was just like, Hydroblast is eating all the sideboard space, and I can just play spells that are playable. Like, don't get me wrong, Hydroblast is obviously the best possible card you can have in your hand all of the time versus red deck, but red deck is only represents say 15% of the decks, and like you only have 15
what if
sideboard
somebody
slots.
plays 2 red decks because they're a genius?
Well,
would you consider that person to be metagaming against Lanny's 3 decks that are all bad against red?
It would happen to turn out that way simply because I forgot to put 4 Hydroblasts in the sideboard of my Storm deck, right? But in any case, really love how the Storm deck is shaking out. Another deck that I don't think is in its final form, but I really wanted to showcase it for the PSS because I thought Lotus Veil was too cool after Lan told me about it. And I thought that I was just in love with the deck ever since seeing Marcus Eovaldi get second place at Easter Champs.
Is Lan just Merlin? Like, he's like straight up Merlin, right? Like, he's just like the greatest. He's like a half demon court wizard who like knows all the secret knowledge of the kingdom.
He's the land behind the throne.
Like, he's just like, this deck needs Lotus Veil.
I thought it
Who
was.
Who even thinks that?
I thought it was. Just,
no, once you said it, I'm like, oh, that's he's just right. It's just obvious.
No, I was just like that.
Once he said so sick,
I was just like that. I was just like, nah. What are you talking about? I was like, it just gets wastelanded, and I was like, well, sometimes they tap their wasteland for mana, and like my PSS opponents and everybody now that I've broadcasted are gonna know that Lotus Veil is in my deck. So like, don't tap your wasteland against me, right? But even then, he's just like, just twiddle the wasteland. And I was just like, yes. After I've added, it's like the Spider Silk Armor moment, right? Where he's just like, well, if you're worried about Call the Herd brawling with your Call the Herd, just play Spider Silk Armor. So it was like one of those. It's like, well, if you're worried about your already ridiculous Lotus Veil getting blown up, well, why don't you just play ridiculous Twiddle to pair with your Lotus Veil? But and now that we have Twiddles, we should just play Time Vault, right? But in any case,
well, one of those cards is not legal.
Yeah, but if it was, and then you could play your Spider Silked Call the Herds and attack with them after taking an extra turn.
All right, so our deck is like 4 Time Vault, 4 Twiddle, 4 Spider Silk Armor,
4 Lotus Veil.
This deck is great.
It's all
right.
All
let's
land
move
suggestions. On. Michael J. We talked about yours.
You can do Michael J.
We talked about yours. You have the Rock. You have Lanny Rock. You put 4 Tempting Worms in the sideboard as a futile attempt to beat Burn. Even though I would assume you're confident against Burn with the rest of your lineup. So already a seemingly strange strategic error. But of course, the Rock has access to no good sideboard cards. It's just like makes your deck go from 45 in game 1 to 47 in game 2. So I'll take it. Tempting Worm.
That 2% is going to keep me under 50%, which is right where the Rock deserves to be.
That's where your bread gets buttered. So notably in this deck, we have 2 Yavimaya Elders. No copies of Phyrexian Rager. Bit the dust in favor of it's harder to cast and less potent.
Lan told me he thought that Elder was better than Phyrexian Rager.
I mean, that's Lan is capable of being wrong sometimes. It happened to all lands. We're playing Wasteland Goblins. The starting 60 is identical to JD's starting 60 from last year's PSS, so a tribute to JD. The starting 15 in the side is nearly the same. Not too much to get in here, except for there's like 1 Tormod's Crypt, which I don't think you'll ever draw when you need it, but by all means.
Because I hate Tormod's Crypt. I used to have 3, and I never sided it in even against Replenish. So then this morning I was just like, oh, you know what I would really wishing to have against that Contamination Lock deck? Tormod's Crypt.
Yeah.
And I only have 1 deck with Tormod's Crypt, and there's only 1. Great, Michael J. But I needed to have room for the Pyrokinesis. And what else did I add? I cut 2 Hull Breaches.
Well, Pyrokinesis also gets the Contamination Lock.
Don't. Why are you ruining it?
They know these things. They know these things.
You gave it away.
They've recorded multiple podcasts. This is for the good of our viewers, and for the good of the commentators.
You gave it away.
And then we have Burn.
What did I cut for Hull Breach?
You don't have Hull Breach, so I assume you just played two.
I know. I cut Hull Breach.
You just did a 2 Tranquil Domain.
I had. That's better against Oath.
I mean, this is a pretty fine Goblin sideboard. 1 Incinerator, 1 Sharpshooter, 4 Naturalized effects to complement the 2 that start, 2 Pyroblast, 2 Red Blast. I mean, maybe a little heavy on the blast, but totally understandable considering that 12/12 is still a deck. And then 4 Pyrokinesis. We talked about it last episode. Ringleader Pyrokinesis is insane. It's insane in the mirror. It's insane versus elves. It's insane versus... Maybe it's not insane versus Burn. I guess we don't know yet. We feel like it's not
insane. It's unclear, although
Burn.
Bill Ellis, ! had Pyrokinesis against me when he beat me, and it was good.
Yeah, so who knows?
Or whether it was good or not, it kept me from trying to ball lightning him.
I love the circular direction because the Burn players are arguing whether or not they should have Jackal Pup in post sideboard. I personally think.
Well, I definitely didn't have Jackal Pup. I knew he had Pyrokinesis.
Right. But that's the circular logic, right? Which is just well, if they don't have Pyrokinesis, then Jackal Pup is a lot better. But if they have Pyrokinesis, Jackal Pup is horrible. And then even if they do have Pyrokinesis, Jackal Pup could still be good.
Really bad.
Yeah. Ball lightning becomes a lot riskier. And Goblin,
you're just very high variance now if you're sideboarding.
I mean, it just goes into what I was talking about, which is Goblins is a very mana inefficient deck and a very very good card advantage deck in the Burn matchup. So you're just tweaking the scales a little bit to gain some mana efficiency at the expense of some of your card advantage. But we'll move on to.
I'm just saying that Jackal Pup is super high variance, right? It's going to pay you really well some games, and it's going to be a disaster some games.
I absolutely agree. It does help to be on the play if you have Jackal Pup in. Burn. This is just Dick's Burn, -1 Bauble, +1 Lava Dart, and 20 lands. And then the sideboard is a pretty stock Burn sideboard with 4 Blast, 4 Pop, 3 Overload, 3 Lava Dart, which I think Lava Dart's actually a horrible overrated card, but that's a topic for another podcast. And 1 Sulfuric Vortex as just a token concession to me. This lineup is totally fine on power until you get to the rock, and totally fine on strategy until you get to the rock, and has a lot of aces until you get to the rock. It is a can opener, an AK-47, and a recurve bow.
Do you think I would have been better off playing just red green Oath Peluche as my third one, and then just had Team Wooded Foothills?
You could name 5.
That was my other thought.
You could probably name a dozen decks before you got to the rock as a good third deck. I think that
Team Wooded Foothills.
I think one interesting thing is that a lot of people would look at this lineup and just be like, oh, there's 2 red decks. Why don't I just ban the not red deck? And then if I have at least 2 decks that are good against red, I'll be in good shape. It's worth noting that there are very few decks that are good against both Goblins and Burn. Goblins and Burn are just completely different decks and rely on completely different cards and strategies, and require answers that are a lot different. So the only deck that you could conceivably make an argument for being good against both Goblins and Burn is maybe some sort of blue-white weenie setup. But your blue-white...
I was say white weenie blue is the best.
But your white weenie setup has to have a bunch of stuff that's good against Burn and not good against Goblins. So your white weenie setup would
Well, you need Silver Knight Worship, which is still liability against the naturalized part of the Goblins.
Yeah, exactly. So Goblins is a lot better at dealing with Silver Knight Worship, and Burn is just a lot better at dealing with a bunch of dumb idiots. Last time I played against McLean...
Silver Knight dies to Curse Scroll, right?
Yeah. Well, everything dies to Curse Scroll in the blue-white weenie deck. The last time I played against the blue-white weenie deck, McLean had a turn 2 standstill, and then I just passed the turn until he got in with Mishra's Factory, right, until I was at 3 life, and then I played every card in my hand, and the game was over. And it was definitely close. But we'll talk about blue white, I guess, once we get to McLean. But I think that that deck you would need a tech for both of the matchups. Like, so the only sort of common ground coverage is the card like Hydro Blast or Blue Blast, but that card is only efficient in an efficient 1-for-1. So if your deck needs that efficiency to stay in lockstep with Goblins or Burn, like it might only catch you up, right? But it won't put you ahead. Like Chill puts you ahead against Burn. Pyroclasm puts you ahead against Goblins, but Hydro Blast only tends to keep you even with either of those decks. Or sorry, Blue Blast. I don't know if I said Pyro or Hydro, but in any case, I actually really don't mind. Like when I was texting Lan, he was just like, "Oh, you know, double red could be a liability," and I just really don't think that there's many decks that beat both Goblins and Burn. Like Enchantress is better against Burn against Goblins than it is against Goblins. Black-White Control is a lot better against Goblins than it is against Burn. Terrageddon probably weak.
Black-White Control is actually like utterly medium against both decks.
Yeah. I mean, there's
a dramatic opening game and then doesn't close them out. That's what I found.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree. I have I've seen a little bit less, but at least it has. Well, at least it has stuff coming out of the sideboard that matters against.
No, I'm just saying utterly medium.
Yeah.
It's just not dominating against either one.
Terrageddon, I think, has more play against Goblins than it does against Burn. So yeah, if you just go down like Hermit Feb, Hermit Feb's a little behind to both, but Burn is a lot more threatening with 4 Price of Progress out of the sideboard than Goblins is, because it can meaningfully, make it impossible for the Hermit Feb to win quickly between suppressing creatures and popping you for 1,000. But anyways, that's just to demonstrate that while the decks are both predominantly red, they are very hard for you to dispatch with a counter strategy. So I thought that was a very resilient part of your lineup. And I think the Rock is resilient in that nobody's going to ban it, and half the people, or roughly 40% of the people, are going to lose to it if they play. So
44.
So like if we take that 44 and then we add the 80% that your unbanned red deck is going to pull, and the fact that you'll probably only play the Rock as like a panic button, I expect you to escape the Swiss with a 4-3 record, and I expect the Rock to get 1 win and 1 loss, slightly above expectation. But moving on to...
That's about what I was shooting for.
Yeah, there you go. Moving on to Chris DiBiase. Chris is, of course, up until recently an online-only player, so it was extremely easy to get a read on him. I said, Chris is going to play Burn because he only plays Burn, and then he's going to play Goblins because he already has 4 Wooded Foothills. And his third deck... I didn't know immediately, but now that we see that it's Black-White Control, a deck that costs about $50 in paper if you ignore printings, definitely makes sense. So Chris, with his first 3 physical Premodern decks that he's ever owned, basically taking what Mike has done and just did the more playable black mid-range deck instead of Mike. There's not much to say here except for Black-White Control is clearly better than the Rock.
DiBiase just has a straight up better line.
It's just Mike. It's just
all right.
Which meme?
Same but better.
Same but better. Yeah.
And he also
I'm you but stronger.
He's got the 4 Sulfuric Vortex. He's got the Lanny Burn version.
Oh, so he's got
same but better.
He actually has Lanny's Dick's Burn. Because he's got 4
Lanny
Bobble
and Dix.
He's got 4 Bobble and he has 4 Sulfuric Vortex and 20 land. So basically he was just kind of like, well, the Lanny Burn deck runs between 21 and 22 lands. The Dix Burn runs 19 to 20 lands with 4 Bobble, which computes to a virtually 21 and change. So he's just like, there's no reason that I can't just play 4 Sulfuric Vortex and Dix Burn and then trim and Incinerate and trim a Shock. And I thought that's very interesting.
That might just be the way to go.
It could be. It honestly could be. I think the one thing that I
think trimming 2 Incinerates is better than trimming a Shock and an Incinerate, though. Incinerate is the lowest return card in the deck.
I maybe agree, but you kind of just... I think it's okay to balance because there's plenty of Okay, I guess this is a pretty...
It's impossible to know.
No. I mean, it's easy to analyze, right? So it's like if you just cut a 2 for a 1, sometimes you float the mana. But if your deck is all 1s and 3s, it ends up being okay because you go 1 into 1 into 3. So 2 ends up being the awkwardest part on your curve because kind come around turn 3, you don't always want to do 2+1. I mean, sometimes you do, but Incinerate's job, whatever. I think balance is fine. Once again, 4 disgusting lava darts, 3 overload, 4 blast, 4 price of progress. Definitely taking to heart sort of what I believe to be the predominant burn theory, which is just that you need blasts, you need price of progress, and you need overload, and then you can decide if you want darts. Chris wants darts. Black-white control is just standard black-white Peluche. Not much to see here. It's a good deck. It loses to Armageddon.
2 Engineered Plague disgusts me much more than Lava Darts disgust you. Just so you know.
I think that
I'm horrified at 2 Engineered Plague.
I think that it's fine to split it with Infest, just because Infest is much more relevant against goblins, especially in this, like the way that this deck functions, right? You're not likely to put 2 onto the battlefield because you just have to draw them or skeletal scrying into them, but like skeletal scrying is kind of a liability against goblins anyways. So Infest can get the job done. You know, I can see worlds in which you Infest, you maybe like do a little bobbing and weaving, you Wrath of God, and then you untap and you play a Exalted Angel, and then you win the game. With elves receding, I think it's somewhat acceptable to play Infest if your deck can cast it. We have 1 Warmth and 2 Cop Red, a random Chainer's Edict, a random Akroma's Vengeance. We're just kind of doing the thing where we just run a little bit of everything in the sideboard. This Goblins list is also Wasteland Goblins. The mana's a little bit... the mana's the same. So 2 Mossfire Valley instead of 1 Mossfire, 1 City of Brass. The Singleton Sparksmith and 4 Gem Palm Incinerator. So this is actually how I have the Goblins.
Creature-hating Goblin deck.
Yeah, this is the Goblin deck, how I had it built on my Mox field, minus the Ancient Tombs and plus... minus Ancient Tombs, 1 Siege Gain Commander, and then basically fixing the mana and adding an Incinerator back.
So you have 2 Mossfire Valley, no City of Brass?
In my... I haven't updated my Goblins list in a while, but I would play... I would do a lot different, because I would play 3 Ancient Tombs, 2 Richardson Port, and then I would play something like 12 green sources and figure out where they come from. So yeah, I would play 2 Mossfire and then 1 City of Brass. I play 3. Oh, no, because it's 9 plus 3. Yeah, I'd try to get to 12 green sources. So 2 Mossfire, 1 City of Brass, X Mountain, Wooded Foothills, Ancient. That's neither here nor there because that's my deck. Sideboard, we're stocked once again, except for we added 2 Goblins, 2 Sabo's Web, which I guess shows that Chris is a listener to the Spike Colony podcast, but only 2 Pyrokinesis, so not quite all in on.
So he must not have been listening hard enough.
He didn't listen to the latest. Chris's lineup is super solid. It is budget considerations aside.
Why is his lineup super solid, but mine is terrible?
Because black-white control is playable.
Oh, okay, it's in the name.
Yeah, like playable dead guy. Like, exactly. Yeah, because his deck contains skeletal scrying, right? Like, I think if you registered the rock deck and like. I think this is what we would do to the rock. We would keep everything as is. We would cut Yavimaya Elder. We would cut 1, I don't know, 1 land or 1 Deranged Hermit or whatever. We played Skeletal Scrying, and we would like actually have card managed in our deck that doesn't come from Pernicious Deed and Recurring Nightmare. And then like it justifies us having like a deck, like you become a better Haunting Echoes deck, right? Because after like you do your rock thing, you can then Skeletal Scrying and get like 6 more looks at your Haunting Echoes instead of never seeing Haunting Echoes when you need it. And going backwards, Haunting Echoes against Hermit Feb is bad because they'll kill you, right? Haunting Echoes is like great against Landstill because you'll eventually draw Haunting Echoes because you're just going to play 40 turns with Landstill. But that's not the case against combo decks. And then Duress Gerard's Verdict is a less fussy combination of cards than Duress Cabal Therapy and Wall of Blossoms. So like Wall of Blossoms is a great card, don't get me wrong, but Cabal Therapy is like an awkward card if you're trying to cast things in flow. Like if you're trying to go 1 into 2, Duress into Gerard's Verdict is much more powerful than Duress into Cabal Therapy float one, or if you just have 2 Cabal Therapies, you might just be in an awkward spot where you're like, if I want to do anything in this game, I need to hit a blind therapy, which is better than an open deck list format. But anyways, Black-White Control, I think, is much better than the Rock. It has access to multiple engines. It does more multiple things. White is just like the better backup color. And notably, you could have played any deck, and Chris is taking budget considerations. And so in his budget considerations, he ended up with like exactly the same lineup as you, but better because he chose the less expensive Rock deck.
Well, I just want to go back to what Lance said when I beat him at the meetup, and he was just like, oh, I was really impressed by Mike's deck until I saw the deck list, and then I saw that he had beaten me with like Yavimaya Elder, which he has 2 copies of, or Recurring Nightmare, which he has 1 copy of, and
So
Dustfall,
drew only the good cards that are good into
yeah. So I just drew the chain where like I'm like tapping 6 and 9 mana every turn to like draw 6 cards and blow up his lands. He's like, wow, this is a really efficient engine. He's just like, wait, that's a 1 of a 1 of and a 2 of.
I mean, that's like, look, I think that your Rock deck is going to make for far better stories and like entertainment than the Black-White Control deck, because like the Black-White Control deck is just like, oh, cycle Eternal Dragon, cast Eternal Dragon, Wrath of God, like whatever, Gerard's Verdict, you lose. But the Rock deck is just like the Rock decks from the every time the Rock was on camera in the PSS, it was great because the gameplay was really good. Like the Rock wasn't good, but the gameplay featuring the Rock was like really excellent.
Sometimes it won matches too.
Yeah.
Occasionally,
it beat me. Tom Metelsky beat me with the Rock. He lost to Rich with the Rock. Went to a 3-game set with Mike Arnold with the natural order Rock. So the Rock is going to be good entertainment, and every dog, the sun shines on a dog's ass some part of the day, as Land put in last time he was here. Nick Mayo's lineup, I love. I love because it has Nick was a lock to play Elves. Elves is of course his sort of signature deck. He's playing Natural Orders and Tangle Wires, which is extremely fun and
classic Elves.
Yeah, has that little spice. Well, no, it's got Natural Order. It's classic Elves with Natural Order, so it's no longer classic. His Stifle deck is blue-black, so a little bit of flavor in the form of blue-black Psychonaut, Stifle.
3 Psychotogs.
Yeah, so 3 Togs.
How does this deck... This deck has got like 3 Duress and 3 Psychotog, and that makes up for basically like 4 Meddling Mage and 2 Sword Supply Shares. Like that is 6 to 1, half a dozen the other.
That is exactly true. There's actually a Singleton Smother. So in order
there's a Vendetta also.
Oh yeah,
so
there's
a
Smother and Vendetta. So we actually cut cantrips because we only have 4 Portent and 2 Impulse. So we are actually like a blue-black mid-range control deck, like a blue-black control deck with like creature removal instead of cantrips. So
23 lands. This is going to be an interesting deck to watch, I think.
This is 23 lands, 4 river, 1 swamp, 10 island, 4 delta.
Oh, I counted Vision Charm. I'm sorry. No,
yeah, 19. Yeah. So it's 19 lands. So it's just sideboard 4 Null, 4 Engineered Plague, 3 Hydroblast, 1 Smother, 2 Sabos Web, 1 Vendetta. Sort of covering all our bases here. And then the Bant Terragen deck, we talked about it a little bit. It's become a champion deck in the hands of a champion. It's got these... it's got access to the Weathered Wayfarer plan. It's got access to the Armageddon plan. It has access to the Call of Herd plan, and it has access to the Meddling Mage plan. So, and then it also has Sylvan Library, which is a notable big pickup against combo and control decks. Sideboard is just some goodies: 2 Cataclysm, 2 Curse Totem, 2 Fire Ice, Hydroblast, Naturalize, Ray of Revelation, Tormod's Crypt, Orb. Lots of utility. Quintessential mid-game deck, mid-range deck. Some lineups, like some hypothetical lineups, would ban this because they are scared of Wasteland and Armageddon. If I look at the decks with a quick skim right now, it doesn't look to me like too many decks are like the sort of mid-range control decks that get beat up by Terra Ganon, with the exception of course, the Rock and Black-White control being super vulnerable. Oh, I guess there's 2 Rock decks and there's Black-White controls. There's 3 Rock decks. So Michael Phillips, Chris DiBiase, and Mike Flores are all going to be scared. Fear the Four-Armageddon deck.
First blush, I think Nick Mayo has the most dangerous lineup for me. This is a tough one because even his Elves deck has Natural Order side plan.
Yeah. And I myself have gone to battle against Nick Mayo's Natural Order pivot, burn against Elves, and did not come out a winner. Moving on to the spiciest lineup in the entire PSS, we have McLean Denny, with Hermit Feb, Mono Black Contamination, which has been tearing up the podcast airwaves, and Blue White Flippy. So HFeb, talked about a lot on this cast. McLean is one of the best pilots of the deck around. He's had a lot of great online finishes. So always cool to watch him play this. It's looking pretty stock. There's 1 Xantid Swarm in the main deck, so that's cool. There's a lot of Elvish Spirit Guide. I don't know if that was always the case. There's 1 Intuition, which has gone in and out of the deck. 1 Meddling Mage has found its way into the deck. But the rest is your normal HFeb stuff. And sideboard is your normal HFeb stuff with 2 Sabo's Web. So lots of respect for Red Green Oath, and only 1 player bringing Red Green Oath, which I have 0 copies of Sabo's Web. So some genius had the idea to maybe just ban Red Green Oath if it was a problem. Mono Black Contamination. If you have not caught up,
super spicy.
If you have not caught up on this deck, go check out All Things Considered and I Got Questions. Alvaro Galindo has been tearing up the sort of South American webcam event and some paper events, I guess, scene with this Mono Black deck. McLean has also picked it up and done some work on it. And this deck, for those of you who don't know, Contamination is a card that's 2 and a B that makes it so that all lands tap for black instead of their normal colors. And every upkeep, to keep it around, you have to sacrifice a creature. Combined with Nether Spirit, you will always have something to sacrifice. It has a bunch of black mid-range tools to go along with it in the form of 4 Dress, 4 Cabal Therapy, some removal, a couple spicy reanimates, which they talk about at length on the cast, Skeletal Scrying, which Skeletal Scrying and Reanimate both help you clean up extra copies of Nether Spirit in your graveyard. Selection in the form of Tainted Pack. We have an Unmask. We have 3 Contagion. We have 4 Zombie Infestation, which is sort of another part of the core engine. So really like sort of low resource-y, prison-y tempo thing. But a really cool deck, and could be the deck that puts the color black on the map. Sideboard is the stuff you have to have. Null Rod to turn off Mox Diamond, Torment's Crypt, and Phyrexian Furnace.
I think I could build this, which would put me at 12 built pre-modern decks, Lanny.
Yeah, it's got some fetches. It's got 2 Bloodstained Mire, 2 Polluted Delta, so got to pull those.
I'm not really worried about that aspect. Yeah. They're just that's not what I'm worried about. Like I have 16 Wooded Foothill decks in rotate. I have 16 Wooded Foothills in my.
So you just couldn't get the last 4 copies, so you built green white instead of red green.
Well, no, that's.
Well, you have 2 copies of burn, so you should probably just take the Wooded Foothills out of one of your burn copies and just proxy it.
No, I don't like that idea at all.
Okay,
I love burn. I love it enough to own 2 copies of the exact same deck.
Hear all about Mono Black Contamination on All Things Considered and Will Hurst podcast. It's a really cool deck, and it's really interesting to hear through how it's evolved and how it's got to its current form. They do a great job of it. I think it's a really sweet dark horse pick because I think nobody really knows if they're good or bad into this deck. For what it's worth,
I think
the Rock is really good against this deck because the Rock contains black cards, and one of the black cards it
including
contains
Haunting Echoes, which can mess up the Nether Spirit part of the deck.
Yeah, well, the Rock never gets locked out by Contamination too if it has a Pernicious Deed on the battlefield. And then
you just need to get that down before
you get contaminated.
The contamination. And
then even if you do get contaminated, like you can hand size. I guess it's like a little hard if you have literally no battlefield, because you can't make a battlefield with black cards. Another point for Phyrexian Rager, but like if you had Fire Extinguisher, you can cast that, and then you can cast Recurring Nightmare to just get anything good out of your graveyard. So your deck notably contains no black creatures. So you might find yourself in a contamination lock if you're very, very unlucky. But
couldn't I just Plague Spirit twice and Plague Spirit and Zombie? Like, wouldn't that make... Wait, is the other spirit, it's just a spirit?
It's just a spirit, yeah. So you would need to draw all 4 of your Engineered Plague. And then also you have to deal with Assembly Worker, so...
Oh, okay, Assembly Worker's a thing.
Yeah, so you would
all
have...
Right, well, that's probably not going to work out then.
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, you're just good, right? Because you have a bunch of Naturalize after board, too, so you just, like, don't tap out of your green. Or you just put a creature onto the battlefield. And then... they have to kill the creature and contaminate you. One thing about this contamination deck, which I don't think was talked about that much on the podcast, is that it's filled with card disadvantage. It has Contagion, it has Unmask, Zombie Infestation. It's in of itself is like not the best card advantage. Like, obviously, it lets you use dead cards.
The worst Zombie Infestation decks ever, right? So
yeah. Like
that's not to say it's a bad deck. It's just like it's bad at using Zombie Infestation among decks that use Zombie Infestation.
Yeah, you're discarding lands to your Zombie Infestation. You're discarding lands and like top deck Duress. So it's just kind of like
people usually want to be discarding Squeeze, right? Like
that has historically been the use, but of course
that could mess up your combo here. That's
the thing is, Nether Spirit is better than Squee in the contamination.
No, it could mess up your combo by having too many creatures in the graveyard.
No, I understand. I'm saying that there are red-black or other contamination decks that have just been infestation contamination, so they just use Squee and Krovikan Horror. And the thing about that is the combo then becomes Buried Alive plus Zombie Infestation plus Contamination, whereas this deck is just draw Contamination, draw Nether Spirit. You're not great at drawing those cards. You just have Skeletal Scrying as your selection and Tainted Pack as your selection. But once you draw those 2 cards, you can assemble the lock instead of drawing 3 cards, which is a lot harder to assemble. But we'll move on from that.
But notably, Force Swamp, Force Snow-Covered Swamp in order to make Tainted Pack a little bit better.
Oh, even better. Force Snow-Covered Swamp, Force Swamp, 2 Polluted Delta, 2 Bloodstained Mire, which double in having different names and fueling Skeletal Scrying. So love the touch there. You could have done all 3s too.
That's just good deck building.
Yeah. Or you could just cut Tainted Pack.
That's good deck building.
That's my consideration. Like, well, you could also just not play Tainted Pack, which I don't know. I'm not a believer, but it always draws a card sometimes. Blue-white Flippy. This is basically at this point, I call this like a low to the ground Landstill deck. But one of the observations that Land made was that Standstill didn't feel great in the deck because the deck wasn't always ahead. So why don't we just like play Fact or Fiction instead, which like maybe serves the purpose better. We have yet to see that what comes out of that, but Blue-white McLean's list has a little bit of everything. It has 2 Fact or Fiction, 1 Impulse, 2 Standstill for its selection and card advantage. For its counter suite, it has a couple mana leaks, a couple memory lapse, 1 prohibit. So it's diversified in that regard. 4 Meddling Mage, of course, supported by 3 Mother of Runes, Exalted Angel, 3 Exalted Angel.
Waterfront Bouncer. Waterfront Bouncer Meddling Mage is kind of hot.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, build your own Reflector it's Mage. Cool. 4 Mishra's Factory. So yeah, it can be a slower deck. 2 Silver Knight. It has the tricky Reverend Mancha, which is exile a white card from your hand to cast, and your creatures. All creatures get protection from the color of your choice. So getting tricky against mass damage or like combat situations, or to make all your guys unblockable. So kind of sweet tech. Sideboard's got a little bit of everything too. A couple of Null, 1 Armageddon, 1 Blue Blast, 1 Cursed Totem, 1 Exalted Angel, 2 Hibernation, 1 Hydroblast, 1 Seal of Cleansing, 2 Teferi's Response, 2 Wrath of God. This is a deck that only has 1 Armageddon and 3 Exalted Angels. So this is the deck that could burn. Actually, this lineup could ban the Rock. If you can believe it. This is the one lineup, because if you ban Hermit Feb, then McLean has to play either Mono Black Contamination or blue white mono dies to
Mono
pernicious deed.
Crushed to pernicious deed against the Rock.
Yeah, against the Rock.
Yeah. Well, and who knows if I know enough to ban Hermit Feb, right? Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows?
But
some people aren't that bright. They had the Rock in their lineup.
I do have to walk back what I said that the Rock is never getting banned. If I'm McLean and I'm looking at your lineup, I would be potentially scared of the Rock, but then you also have to contend with this.
Let's not be crazy. He's not scared of the Rock. He might still ban it.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, no one is scared of the Rock. Like, you get wins and losses. Sometimes you lose to a donkey. Sometimes you win against a master. No one is scared of the Rock.
Good point. This is all very clear.
The only person in the world who should be scared of the Rock is Mike Hoyp, who actively plays it at LobsterCon every year for some reason.
That's true.
He should be terrified of the Rock.
He should fear what it's been doing to his win rate at the biggest stage.
Isn't like Mike Hoyp like the all-time leader in monthly wins, and he's just like, I'm just gonna play the Rock at the biggest tournament of the year, though.
I don't actually know who the all-time leader in monthly wins is, but it's also goes back quite a few years, and the size of the monthly has obviously gotten really high. But McLean's lineup into your lineup is kind of funny. I guess he's pretty. You guys are going to end up with a flip where Burn is. Oh, he might have to ban Burn too, though, because Burn's generally good against contamination, and then I think I still have Burn ahead of Silver Knight Worship, even though there's no Worship in this deck anyways. So I have Burn ahead.
Oh, he has no Worship, but how many Geddons? Only one?
Yeah.
One in sideboard also. I mean, some of the creatures are just not scary. Like Waterfront Bouncer is not scary for Burn.
Yeah.
Weather Wayfarer is not scary for Burn.
So
who knows? I don't want to strategize about it right now.
Can't strategize too much. Well, I gotta strategize out loud to blow up your spot, obviously a little bit. But anyways, super cool stuff. Bans and picks are going to be like really tricky into this lineup because there's just a lot of unknowns. Like a lot of people just don't know how their decks play against into these decks. Like Chris DiBiase has never played against Hermit Feb because it's not online. So I
who's played a lot against Hermit Feb? Pog.
Yeah.
Pog and Decal just played nothing but Hermit Feb over LobsterCon weekend last year, which is what resulted in Decal winning the Saturday tournament.
Right. That's the playtest grind for you.
Nothing but Hermit Feb.
Moving on.
Weekend. Mike Harris.
Yeah, go for it.
Mike Harris. I mean, do we really have to talk about Mike Harris? He gets a lot of podcast airtime, and 2 of the 3 decks are like Mike Harris signatures. What we should talk about is the 3rd deck, right? Is that fair or no? These are literally Mike Harris signatures. He's one of the most famous pre-modern content creators.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have to talk about his decks at all. They're okay. No, we should talk a little bit about Feb with no H. Feb with no H. So Feb with no H is just full English breakfast, so we don't have the Hermit combo in. We get to play basic lands. We get to have tighter mana.
That's the big thing, right?
Yeah.
Like your mana is less disastrous against Price of Progress. It's still not great.
Yeah. But Feb with no H, the last time he played it was Treva Feb. So it was a blue, white, green Feb that used a lot of Meddling Mage. This is a blue, green, black Feb, or like mostly a green, black Feb. It has a random Auramancer in here. And it has, of course,
Treva's Ruins.
It has 4 Cabal Therapy and 4 Unearth. Yeah, he has Treva's Ruins to help him splash into, it looks like exactly 1 sideboard Meddling Mage, main deck, Monk Realist, and Auramancer. But the rest of the core of this Feb deck is just blue for Vara Shapeshifter, obviously, black for Unearth, Cabal Therapy. Oh, there's 4 Intuitions in here. So that's the wild thing that's going on. So we have the option to Intuition for triple Cabal Therapy, which is a sick play. We have 2 Squeeze, so we can get much grindier. And Intuition's going to set that up. So that's actually kind of the marquee change, which is just 4 Intuition instead of Hermit Druid. I love 4 Intuition. I'm very sad not to see any Deep Analysis or Call the Herd coming out of the sideboard to complement this Intuition, but we do have a lot of goodies to put in the graveyard. It'll be pretty interesting to see this deck in action. I do think that we'll leave it to Mike to talk about it on his podcast, or the next time he talks about it publicly, because we're just not experts in this. And there's a lot of decisions here that are just super interesting, I guess. I mean, I guess the simplest thing is really that it's HFEB, but instead of the H, we have I in the form of intuition. So it's
IFEB.
Intuition, full English breakfast.
It's like an iPhone, but it's an IFEB. Okay. Smiths, Red Green Goblins, only person smart enough to play Red Green Oath. Yeah. And third deck, Black Blue Psychotog. The Black Blue Psychotog is a heater. This deck's got a Limb Duels.
So the Goblins list is stock once again, except for we're on ports instead of Wastelands. The other Smiths, of course, is one of the biggest port fans. So that explains that. But the rest is the same. We do have the Spark Smiths. Really
the smartest player. He's got Rishad on port instead of Wasteland, instead of the Wasteland donkeys. No offense to DiBiase, Wasteland donkey. And he's the only person smart enough for Red Green Oath. Yeah. A deck that I thought about playing for Team Wooded Foothills, but instead I opted for the worst deck in the available 24 decks. So my rock is 24 out of 24, right? Like it's the blue green stasis of this lineup.
You mean like the worst deck out of all 24 decks?
Yeah. I could have had Red Green.
I think that the worst deck. Well. The thing is, Michael Phillips also has the rock. So
I mean, and you're not a huge fan of the flippy deck.
So,
right? So
I don't like that. I don't like the flippy deck. I think that the contamination deck is either great or bad.
It is sweet. It is sweet.
Like, okay, the thing I don't fully understand about the contamination deck is just like how it gets it together, because I want to see it play, because I'm just like looking at this deck and I'm like, how do you win anything just drawing?
Andy was playing it at the meetup the other night.
Just drawing one card a turn. Like, it's just kind of like one of those things. It's just like you don't have any card advantage except for this skeletal scrying, but you have so much card. Like, all your cards put you down in cards, and you only have 4 copies.
Tainted Pack, dog.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, contamination buys you infinity draw steps if it doesn't just win the game. Maybe, like, I don't know. I'll put it like this. If you told me that contamination was good because contamination lock was really good, then I'd be like, I'd kind of see the vision. The part that I didn't understand was that Alvaro was talking about it. He's like, listen, this is a mono black mid-range deck that happens to have the contamination lock. And when you frame it like that, I'm like, well, it doesn't look like a good mid-range deck. But
that's a bad mid-range deck, right? Like, that's the thing.
That's I mean, if you that would be my read.
Yeah, like, how could this be a good mid-range deck? Like, it doesn't have a lot of removal. It doesn't have overwhelming threats. Like, the good mid-range decks in the format, like, dominate people's, like, small creatures with, like, Exalted Angel, Eternal Dragon, or at least Ravenous Baloth and Deranged Hermit.
Well,
like,
the thing is, Nether Spirit actually is very efficient at dominating goblins.
It's, like, efficient at blocking, kind of.
That's unlimited.
Like, that's straight up a... I don't know, man. Like, if they have like a sharpshooter or a Gem Palm Incinerator, it's not very efficient at all, right? You need to be contamination locked.
Well, it's efficient because it's 0 mana. Well, I mean, you have
and it's hard to hold up on defense while contamination locking them. Like that's hard to do simultaneously.
But the thing is, contamination lock does put them out of casting spells for the rest of the game. So if they do anything,
it doesn't stop them from sacrificing a Gem Palm. It doesn't stop them from sacrificing a Spark Smith. Not Spark. Sorry. What the hell's this guy's name? He makes
Skirk
red.
Prospector.
You know the guy. It's just Skirk Prospector, or tapping a Spark Smith or a just a sharpshooter.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, but those are all like basically the plan is to like Sickening Dreams the board clear, or like as long as your opponent doesn't have any of those goblins, then you put in contamination in play, and then you worry about the battlefield. Because like Zombie Infestation also lets you.
There's only one Sick as Hell Dreams in this deck, and there's no tutoring, right?
Well, yeah, but you've got 2 Engineered Plague too. Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm just saying that the contamination.
I'm just saying, if you told me this was a good lock deck, I wouldn't fight you.
Contamination
I don't
Squad
know if it's a good lock deck or not. Not a good mid-range deck.
Contamination Squad thinks that Goblins is like a slam dunk matchup. I mean, the Contagions are also going to do work, right? So.
Oh, I don't know. I would believe them. I only have one Tormod script.
Yeah.
I'm just saying I don't know. But it doesn't seem like a good mid-range.
Back to James Smits. Smits is a returning PSS champion, so he's foregone his discretionary invite for at least 2 years in a row. I think he probably won PSS 3. And so now he's using his discretionary invite, and he's back. He's got, obviously, 3 of the best decks in the format, with the Dark Horse being a blue-black Psychotog deck. Or, sorry, blue-black Psychotog Dreadnought deck. Opting for pretty much the same setup, where we have, instead of some cantrips, we have the 4th Duress, and we have 1 Limb Duel's Vault. But yeah, we put 3 Psychotog
and Impulse.
And we have no creature removal in the starting. No Smother, no Vendetta.
Creature removal, you could just play a 12-12, or for that matter, a 12-13.
I mean, the only reason is that if your plan is to sometimes go long with Psychotog, having a little bit of removal for the battlefield is like relevant, right?
I love the fact that there's an Upheaval in the sideboard. That's kind of great.
Yeah, Upheaval sick. And in fact, we still don't have spot removal in the sideboard. Sideboard is 4 Null, 3 Engineered Plague. We're going to see,
I think, of
a lot of
Hydroblast and Blue Blast is spot removal. That feels like spot removal to Michael J.
Right, but nothing in this deck can kill a Terravor.
All right. Well, he's the only person with a Terravor in his lineup, so that would be some kind of dividing by 0 if he was playing against himself, right?
That's true. There's Terrageddon, but there's no other.
Oh no, that's not true. Nick Mayo has a Terravor.
Yeah. But it's not like,
not in the Terravor deck.
It's not like a 14/14 Terravor. Like Nick Mayo's Terravors are like 5/5s.
Well, close it out. Michael Phillips, also a Red Green Goblins deck, and he has Wasteland. So Smiths is still the only person smart enough to play Richard on Port.
We talked about it, that sometimes somebody's random main deck Sabo's Web is going to catch your port. Of course, nobody crazy enough to put Sabo's Web in their main deck, so we're not overly.
It takes a certain kind of genius to say take out Impulse and add Sabo's Web.
Yeah, a certain kind of genius. Luckily, no genius is here. Yeah, so the Goblins is cool. The Rock, we have Blasto Rock, 3 Blastoderm, 3 Wall of Roots, 1 Yavimaya Elder, 2 Recurring Nightmare, 2 Living Wish. So we got the Living Wish package into the sideboard of 1 Bone Shredder, 1 Deranged Hermit, 1 Dust Bowl.
Oh, this deck is just better than mine, I think. Other than the Blastoderms, he's got 2 Recurring Nightmare. It doubles his likelihood of drawing it. Because nobody's deck is tutoring for anything, unless it's a creature in the sideboard. Yeah,
I mean, I think, so what did he give up? He just doesn't have Call the Herd? I think that is relevant, but he's also a worse Pernicious Deed deck with Wall of Roots getting blown up sometimes.
Bird and a wall, yeah.
There's no bird.
That's the whole point of Lanny Rock.
Yeah. There's no bird, though. Wall of Roots is conscionable include, because there are plenty of situations where you're going to deed for 1 to blow up everything under your wall. So that's kind of don't get me wrong, Birds of Paradise was always the card that I was kind of on the Rock, especially with the curve consideration. There were so many 4s in the Rock. So Wall of Roots makes more sense in a world with a lot of 4s. But I don't know. That's why I want to experiment. That's why I want to play 1/3 Rock, where you go birds into Call the Herd or birds into Rager a lot of the time. And that's kind of potent, but and you have to obviously trim Pernicious Deed in that world. But this is a Living Wish Rock. Smother Vendetta. Didn't go overboard on the sideboard wish targets. I don't mind that. Even this 1 Spike Feeder feels like an extremely greedy wish target, because if you're going to spend 5 mana to gain 4 life against burn, it's probably not going to be good for you. And we have nothing else for burn in this sideboard. So I'm assuming that if burn is in your opponent's range from Michael Phillips' side, you would just ban it because the burn deck could, of course, just ban your Enchantress and catch 2 good matchups, depending on who you
they
ask.
can just ban the Enchantress deck?
Yeah.
That wasn't something that I immediately put my eyes on. I'm like, don't even want to think about this one.
Michael Phillips's signature deck, of course, is Enchantress. Enchantress is basically stock. There's 1 Enlightened Tutor. There's 3 Miri's Guile. Once again, jury's out for me on Miri's Guile.
Are the Miri's Guile's there just to try to trick people into not banning it and be like, oh, don't worry about it. I've just got Miri's Guile.
Yeah, I mean, there's 0 copies of Sylvan Library. Sideboard.
Even though it's a Words of War deck?
We have a sideboard.
Shrug.
We have a sideboard Ground Seal, which is I haven't seen that before in a Premodern deck. It's like
I own so many Ground Seals because I don't remember what deck I thought they were supposed to go in, but I accidentally ordered like
some green deck that's bad against Reanimator.
I have like 24 Ground Seals, but most of them are like different versions of new printings.
Oh, boo.
But luckily, I think I have 4 copies of the original printing. Okay, that was all the PSS decks. I have to practice for the RC, so take it home, Lanny.
That's horrible. We're not even 2 hours in. Tune in.
We're like 10 minutes from 2 hours.
Tune in to the Premodern Showdown series every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern. We talked about the decks, but I just want to say that the players are absolutely great, awesome, famous, handsome people who all really are people that I look up to in the community that I think do a lot of great work. So, while this is like a battle and a fight, like this is also just, just a really cool showcase of some of the sweetest people in Premodern. So that's going to be cool. A lot of people's signature decks. I literally was like, I was going to not play Grotog, but then I felt it would be like a huge disservice to the purpose of this.
I didn't even think about this. It's like a ton of signature decks, right? Like you on Gat, me on Burn, DiBiase on Burn.
Mail's on Elves, McLean's on Hermit Feb, Mike's on Spicy Feb, Smith's and Michael Phillips on Enchantress. I don't know, because Smith's has been relatively quiet. I know that he was in New York, but he hasn't been, like, I haven't seen him at Meetup often, and so I had the least info on him. But he brought Burn to last year's LobsterCon, and
in the top 16.
Yeah, something like that. And then of course he is half of the Smiths brothers, so. Definitely, and he's a PSS champion. So what can you say? That's all good. So Wednesdays, 7 p.m. Eastern.
Really disappointed at no Gaia's Blessing Stasis this year.
Yeah.
Not even one copy.
Yeah, the worst. Weird. The fact that the worst decks this year are like black mid-range decks is saying a lot, right? And like Storm, like if you were looking at this, you like some people probably think that the Storm.
I think your Storm deck might go undefeated. It also might go unplayed, but it might go undefeated.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly don't know. Some of these decks are. I thought so. My calculus with Storm was that it's like really good against like random tier 2 decks. But like if the decks are like all tier 1 decks, then things get a little bit dicier. Like all decks, we've talked so much about pivots and plans. Like Storm is so good because if your opponent can't pivot into like a plan that's like meaningfully disruptive of you, either your hand, your artifacts, or your lands, like then you're in great shape. But all of these decks have a mix of like their own really good clocks, their own really good win cons, their own really good disruption in the form of hand disruption, land disruption, or artifact disruption. So I think Storm could have a hard time, and I'm going to be leaning really hard on Landy Hoth and Grotog, which are a little bit more proven elements for me. And then even Landy Hoth, I forgot to say this, but like you and Lan, like I'm actually trusting you on this because my experience with the deck hasn't been the same. Like when I've played it, it doesn't feel like a tier 1 deck. It doesn't feel like Lan thinks it's the most powerful deck in the format. And, I started with his list, I started making changes. And there's like, it's definitely good and interesting and unique, but I don't know if it's truly great, but I wanted to also, showcase Lan's deck because I my other option would be to just play Red Green Oath, and that seems like no fun. So this is like my way to have a spicier Oath deck.
Last two meetups or $1,000 tournaments Lan showed up for that he played the deck. He beat me on Green White Control, and he beat me on Tom Matelski Devourer, which is the famous, you don't have Guy's Blessing. And then he's just like, but I do have Crows and Reclamation.
Yes, indeed.
Replenished.
Everyone wish Mike luck at his shameful Contemporary Magic event. He's going to need it, of course. This was Spike Colony 37. Sorry we were down last
38.
week. 38. Yeah, 38. Sorry we were down last week. I don't know what your excuse was, but it was probably Contemporary Magic. Be sure to...
I have been practicing a lot of Contemporary Magic, so...
Be sure to check out my YouTube. I posted coverage of the entire... not the entire, starting in round 2, the Premodern Challenge. So my Premodern Challenge was hilarious. In round 1, I got paired against Pit Rack, which is bad against most decks. It's pretty good against Storm. Like, Hypnotic Spectre is like a hilariously great card against a deck with no removal.
Great against 12-12, let me tell you.
Yeah, Pit Rack's also insane against...
I got to roll for real, Lanny.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, this is Spike Colony 38. We'll see you on the other side of week 1 of Premodern Showdown series. Love Lanny. Love Spike Colony.
Bye.
Game over.